That
Marcus
won't work.
Rodriguez
We need a
wiped the
better
sweat
plan.
from his
Ma'am, with all
forehead
due
as he
respect, I
balanced
believe it
3
will.
plates
Your
on his
belief isn't
arms,
enough. Get it done.
navigating
Yes,
through the
ma'am.
crowded
You were
university
directly involved.
cafeteria
Don't
during
deny
the
it.
lunch rush.
I didn't start it, ma'am.
The
That doesn't
22-year-old
excuse
business
your
student had
actions.
been working at the
Understood?
campus dining
We
hall
need to
for
talk
8
about
months
the
now,
reports.
trying to
I
pay
know.
his way through
It's a
college while
difficult
maintaining
situation.
decent
We'll get through
grades.
it.
The job wasn't glamorous, but it helped cover his rent and textbooks. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual afternoon chaos. Students clustered around tables discussing upcoming exams and weekend plans. Faculty members grabbed quick lunches between classes. The constant chatter mixed with the clatter of dishes and the hum of refrigeration units created a familiar symphony that Marcus had grown accustomed to. He moved carefully between the tables, his mind focused on delivering the orders without incident. That's when he noticed her. A woman sitting alone at a corner table, quietly eating a simple sandwich while reading what appeared to be a thick technical manual. She looked to be in her 30s, with short brown hair and an understated appearance. Her clothes were plain dark slacks and a simple blouse, nothing that would make her stand out in the crowd of students and professors. Marcus thought she might be a graduate student, or perhaps a young professor from one of the engineering departments. She had that serious, focused demeanor that many academics carried. Her table was positioned near the main walkway, right where the lunch rush traffic was heaviest. As Marcus approached her table, balancing the 3 plates, a group of undergraduate students suddenly burst into loud laughter at a nearby table. The unexpected sound startled him, causing him to stumble slightly. He tried to regain his balance, but the momentum carried him forward. His shoulder bumped into the woman's chair with more force than he intended. The impact sent her forward, causing her to drop her sandwich and knock over her water glass. The liquid spread across the table, soaking her manual, and reaching the edge where it began to drip onto the floor. Several other diners turned to look at the commotion. "Watch where you're going!" Marcus snapped, his frustration getting the better of him. The stress of the busy lunch shift, combined with his embarrassment at the accident, made him defensive. "You shouldn't sit so close to the walkway if you can't handle people walking by." The woman looked up at him calmly, her expression unreadable. She didn't seem angry or upset, which somehow made Marcus feel even more defensive. She simply reached for some napkins and began cleaning up the spilled water without saying a word. "Great. Now I have to clean this mess up too," Marcus continued, setting down the plates he was carrying on a nearby table with more force than necessary. "Don't you people understand that we're trying to work here?" A few students at neighboring tables had stopped their conversations to watch the scene unfold. Marcus felt their eyes on him, which only increased his agitation. He grabbed a rag from his apron and began wiping the table with sharp, irritated movements. The woman finally spoke, her voice quiet and measured. "It's all right. These things happen." She picked up her soggy manual and shook off the excess water. "I should probably find another place to finish reading anyway." Her calm response somehow irritated Marcus even more. He expected her to apologize or at least acknowledge that she was partially at fault for sitting in such an inconvenient location. Instead, she seemed completely unbothered by the situation. "Yeah, maybe you should," Marcus replied curtly. "The library exists for a reason. People come here to eat, not to spread out their homework all over the tables." The woman gathered her belongings slowly and methodically. She wrapped the remains of her sandwich in a napkin and tucked the damaged manual under her arm. As she stood to leave, she looked directly at Marcus with steady, intelligent eyes. "Thank you for cleaning up," she said simply, then walked away toward the cafeteria exit. Marcus watched her go, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and unease. He had stood his ground and made his point, but something about her composed demeanor left him feeling like he had somehow come out looking worse in the exchange. He shook off the feeling and returned to his work, delivering the remaining plates to their intended table. The rest of his shift passed without incident, though he found himself glancing occasionally toward the corner table where the woman had been sitting. He told himself he was just making sure it stayed clean, but truthfully, something about the encounter bothered him in a way he couldn't quite articulate. When his shift ended, Marcus changed out of his work uniform and headed to his afternoon economics class. The lecture hall was packed, as Professor Williams was known for his engaging teaching style and practical approach to economic theory. Marcus found a seat in the middle section and pulled out his notebook. "Today we're going to discuss leadership in economic organizations," Professor Williams announced as he began writing on the whiteboard. "But first, I want to introduce someone very special who has agreed to guest lecture for us today." Marcus looked up from his notebook as the professor continued speaking. Our guest has extensive experience in organizational leadership under some of the most challenging circumstances imaginable. She has managed budgets in the millions, supervised thousands of personnel, and made decisions that affect international operations. Please welcome General Sarah Chen from the Army War College. Marcus felt his stomach drop as the woman from the cafeteria walked onto the stage. She had changed into a crisp military uniform adorned with ribbons and insignia that spoke of years of distinguished service. Brilliant, greatest addiction. The plain clothes that had made her seem so ordinary earlier were replaced by the unmistakable authority of her rank. The same calm, intelligent eyes that had looked at him during their encounter now surveyed the lecture hall filled with students. When her gaze briefly passed over his section of the room, Marcus slumped lower in his seat, hoping desperately that she wouldn't recognize him among the sea of faces. General Chen began her presentation with the same measured tone she had used in the cafeteria. Leadership isn't about commanding respect through force or intimidation, she said, clicking to the first slide of her presentation. True leadership is about maintaining composure under pressure, treating others with dignity even in difficult situations, and understanding that how we handle small challenges often reflects how we'll handle larger ones. Marcus felt each word like a personal criticism. He remembered his harsh words and defensive attitude, contrasting them sharply with her calm response to his rudeness. The irony wasn't lost on him that he had lectured a military general about understanding how busy people work. In my experience, General Chen continued, the mark of a true leader is someone who can remain professional and composed even when others around them are not. This applies whether you're managing a crisis in a combat zone or dealing with everyday interpersonal conflicts in civilian life. The lecture continued for the next hour, with General Chen sharing insights from her military career and drawing connections to business leadership principles. She spoke about managing diverse teams, making decisions with incomplete information, and maintaining morale during difficult periods. Her examples ranged from coordinating international humanitarian missions to implementing new training programs that improved unit effectiveness. Marcus found himself genuinely impressed by her presentation, which made his earlier behavior seem even more embarrassing. She displayed a depth of knowledge and experience that he could barely comprehend, yet she had accepted his rudeness with grace and dignity that he now realized he didn't deserve. When the lecture ended, students began filing out of the hall, many stopping to thank General Chen for her time. Marcus remained in his seat, unsure whether to approach her or simply leave quietly. Part of him wanted to apologize, but another part worried that drawing attention to himself would only make things worse. As he finally gathered his things and stood to leave, he noticed that General Chen was looking directly at him. She gave him a small nod, not unfriendly, but not particularly warm either. It was the acknowledgement of someone who remembered their previous encounter, but chose not to make an issue of it. Marcus nodded back awkwardly and hurried toward the exit, his mind racing with thoughts about the day's events. He had learned more about leadership in the past hour than in all his previous business classes combined, and the lesson had come from someone he had treated with disrespect just a few hours earlier. Outside the lecture hall, Marcus pulled out his phone and looked up General Sarah Chen online. The search results showed an impressive military career spanning over 15 years, with deployments to multiple conflict zones and recognition for her leadership in both combat and peacetime operations. She held advanced degrees in international relations and strategic studies and had been featured in several articles about women in military leadership roles. Reading about her accomplishments, Marcus realized how completely he had misjudged the situation in the cafeteria. He had assumed she was just another student or low-level academic, someone whose time and space were less important than his work responsibilities. The reality was that he had been rude to someone whose daily decisions affected thousands of lives and whose leadership experience dwarfed anything he could imagine. That evening, Marcus couldn't concentrate on his homework. He kept replaying the cafeteria incident in his mind, cringing at his words and behavior. He thought about how General Chen had responded with such composure, never once raising her voice or matching his hostile tone. Even when he had been deliberately rude, she had thanked him for cleaning up the spill he had caused. He began to understand that her calm response hadn't been weakness or submission. It had been strength. She had chosen not to escalate the situation, not to use whatever authority or status she possessed to put him in his place. Instead, she had demonstrated the kind of leadership she would later describe in her lecture, maintaining dignity under pressure and treating others with respect even when they don't deserve it. Marcus realized that he had learned something valuable that day, though not in the way he had expected. The encounter had shown him the difference between reacting emotionally to stress and responding with thoughtful composure. It had revealed his own assumptions and prejudices about who deserves respect and consideration. As he finally tried to focus on his economics textbook, Marcus found himself thinking about what it really meant to be a leader. It wasn't about being the loudest voice in the room or demanding that others accommodate your needs. It was about setting an example through your actions and treating everyone with the same respect, regardless of their apparent status or position. The lesson from General Chen's unexpected presence in his life would stay with him long after the immediate embarrassment faded. Sometimes the most important learning experiences come not from textbooks or formal instruction, but from witnessing how others handle the small moments that reveal true character. The next morning brought Marcus no relief from his embarrassment. He had barely slept, his mind replaying the previous day's events in an endless loop. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw General Chen's calm expression as he berated her for sitting too close to the walkway. The memory made him physically cringe. Marcus arrived at his morning shift at the cafeteria 30 minutes early, hoping to lose himself in work and avoid thinking about the incident. The kitchen was quiet at this hour, with only the early prep crew bustling around preparing for breakfast service. He tied his apron and began setting up the serving stations, arranging utensils and checking that the warming trays were properly heated. Linda Martinez, the cafeteria manager, noticed his early arrival and unusual quietness. Linda had been managing the dining services for 12 years and had seen countless student workers come and go. She prided herself on reading people well, and something was clearly bothering Marcus. "You're here early today," she observed, approaching him as he mechanically arranged coffee cups near the beverage station. "Everything okay? You seem a bit off." Marcus hesitated, unsure whether to share what had happened. Linda had always been understanding with the student workers, but admitting that he had been rude to a customer, especially one who turned out to be a distinguished military officer, felt too embarrassing to confess. "Just couldn't sleep," he said finally.
"Thought I'd get an early start." Linda studied his face for a moment. She had managed enough young people to know when someone was carrying guilt about something, but she also knew when to push and when to let things develop naturally.
"All right, well, since you're here early, would you mind helping with the special breakfast setup? We're hosting a faculty meeting this morning, and they've requested the conference room be set up with coffee and pastries." Marcus nodded, grateful for the distraction. He spent the next hour arranging tables, setting up coffee urns, and displaying an assortment of pastries and fresh fruit. The methodical work helped calm his mind somewhat, though thoughts of General Chen continued to surface periodically. As the regular breakfast crowd began arriving, Marcus found himself scanning every face that entered the cafeteria. Part of him dreaded seeing General Chen again, while another part hoped for a chance to apologize properly. He served students and faculty with extra politeness, as if trying to make up for his previous day's behavior through better treatment of other customers. Around mid-morning, during a brief lull in service, Marcus was wiping down tables when he overheard a conversation between two professors from the political science department. "Sarah Chen's presentation yesterday was remarkable," Professor Thompson was saying to his colleague. "I've been trying to get someone of her caliber to speak to my international relations class for months." The students were completely engaged. "She has that effect," replied Professor Kim. "I attended one of her presentations at a conference last year about post-conflict reconstruction. Brilliant woman. Did you know she managed the logistics for the humanitarian aid distribution in 3 different countries? Coordinated with local governments, international organizations, and military units simultaneously." Marcus froze, his cleaning cloth suspended over the table surface. He moved closer to their table, pretending to clean nearby surfaces while listening to their conversation. "I heard she's being considered for a position at the Pentagon," Professor Thompson continued. "Strategic planning for international operations. It would be a significant promotion, but honestly, with her track record, she could probably run for political office if she wanted to. She's exactly the kind of leader this country needs." Professor Kim agreed. "Someone who can work with people across different backgrounds and viewpoints without letting ego get in the way. I watched her handle some pretty aggressive questioning after her presentation, and she never once became defensive or dismissive." The irony of that last comment hit Marcus like a physical blow. While General Chen had demonstrated grace under pressure during aggressive questioning from academics, he had become defensive and rude over a simple accident that was entirely his fault. Marcus continued his cleaning rounds, but his mind was elsewhere. He began to truly comprehend the magnitude of his mistake. This wasn't just about being rude to a customer. He had disrespected someone whose life was dedicated to serving others, someone who had likely faced genuine life-or-death challenges that made spilled water seem utterly trivial. During his lunch break, Marcus walked to the library and found a quiet corner where he could research more about General Chen's background. What he discovered made his embarrassment deepen further. She had led disaster relief operations following major earthquakes, coordinated evacuation efforts for American citizens during political upheavals abroad, and had been recognized multiple times for her innovative approaches to international cooperation. One article described her work establishing a joint training program that brought together military personnel from allied nations to practice humanitarian response scenarios. Another detailed her role in developing new protocols for civilian protection during military operations. Every accomplishment he read about emphasized her commitment to treating all people with dignity and respect, regardless of their circumstances. Marcus also found several interviews where General Chen discussed leadership philosophy. In one particularly relevant quote, she said, "True strength isn't about proving your authority to others. It's about choosing to respond with compassion and professionalism, especially in moments when doing so is difficult." Reading those words, Marcus realized that General Chen had been demonstrating exactly that philosophy during their encounter. She had chosen compassion and professionalism in the face of his rudeness, treating him with more respect than he had shown her. When Marcus returned from his break, he found Linda reviewing inventory sheets near the cash register. She looked up as he approached, noting the troubled expression that had returned to his face. "Marcus, you've been distracted all day," she said, setting down her clipboard. "I know something's bothering you. If it's affecting your work, we need to talk about it." This time, Marcus decided to be honest. He told Linda about the previous day's incident, explaining how he had been rude to a customer who turned out to be General Chen. He described his shock during the economics lecture and his growing awareness of how poorly he had behaved. Linda listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious as Marcus described his actions. When he finished, she was quiet for several moments, processing what she had heard. "Marcus, I appreciate you telling me this," she said finally. "It takes courage to admit when we've made mistakes, but you understand that how you treated that customer was completely unacceptable regardless of who she was?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know I messed up badly. The fact that she turned out to be a general makes it more embarrassing for you personally, but it doesn't change the fundamental issue," Linda continued. "Every customer deserves to be treated with respect. That's basic customer service, and it's basic human decency." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I want to make it right somehow, but I don't know how. I can't exactly walk up to a general and ask for forgiveness." Linda considered this for a moment. "Actually, you might be surprised. In my experience, people in positions of real authority are often more understanding about honest mistakes than you'd expect. The question is whether you're genuinely sorry for your actions or just embarrassed about who you were rude to." That question struck at the heart of Marcus's internal struggle. Was he upset because he had been disrespectful to a fellow human being, or was he only concerned because that person happened to hold an important position? The distinction mattered, and Linda's question forced him to examine his true motivations. I think I'm sorry for both reasons," Marcus admitted. "I'm embarrassed about who she was, but I'm also realizing that what I did was wrong regardless of who she was. I was stressed and tired, but that's no excuse for taking it out on someone else." Linda smiled for the first time during their conversation. "That's a mature answer, Marcus. Growth often comes from exactly these kinds of uncomfortable moments. The question now is what you plan to do with this learning experience." "I want to apologize to her properly," Marcus said with growing conviction. "I know it might seem awkward or inappropriate, but I think I need to own up to what I did." "That could be tricky," Linda warned. "You don't want to put her in an uncomfortable position or make it seem like you're only apologizing because of her rank. If you're going to do this, it needs to be genuine and respectful." Marcus spent the rest of his shift thinking about how he might approach General Chen appropriately. He couldn't simply show up at her office, assuming he could even find it, as that would seem presumptuous and potentially intrusive. He needed to find a way to apologize that respected her time and position while allowing him to take responsibility for his actions. That evening, Marcus attended his weekly study group for the economics class. The other students were still buzzing with excitement about General Chen's guest lecture, discussing the insights she had shared and debating various points she had made about leadership in economic organizations. "She really changed how I think about authority," said Jessica, one of his study partners. The way she described leadership as service rather than dominance was eye-opening. "I loved how she handled that one student who tried to challenge her about women in combat roles," added David. "She didn't get defensive at all. She just calmly presented the facts and moved on. You could tell she's dealt with much worse." Marcus listened to their comments with growing appreciation for how General Chen had conducted herself during the lecture. She had faced challenging questions and potential confrontations with the same composure she had shown during their cafeteria encounter. "Did anyone else notice how she emphasized treating everyone with respect, regardless of their position?" Jessica continued. "That seems to be a core principle for her." Those words gave Marcus an idea. Rather than trying to approach General Chen directly, perhaps he could demonstrate his growth through his actions at work. He could make an effort to treat every customer with the respect and professionalism that he had failed to show her. It wouldn't undo his mistake, but it would be a way of honoring the lesson she had taught him. Over the following days, Marcus threw himself into being the best cafeteria worker he could be. He greeted every customer with genuine politeness, remained patient during busy periods, and went out of his way to help solve problems rather than create them. When a student accidentally knocked over a tray of food, Marcus helped clean up without complaint. When an elderly professor needed assistance carrying multiple items to a table, Marcus offered to help immediately. Linda noticed the change in his attitude and performance. Other co-workers began commenting on Marcus's improved customer service and positive energy. Students started recognizing him as one of the friendlier workers in the cafeteria. But Marcus still felt the weight of his unaddressed mistake. He had improved his behavior going forward, but he hadn't directly acknowledged his wrongdoing to the person he had wronged. The guilt continued to gnaw at him, reminding him that growth required not just changed behavior, but accountability for past actions. As he walked across campus after his evening shift, Marcus noticed a small crowd gathered outside the Student Union building. A banner announced a public forum on leadership in public service, featuring several speakers from different fields. Among the listed speakers was General Sarah Chen. This seemed like the opportunity Marcus had been looking for, a public event where he might be able to approach General Chen appropriately after her presentation. It would be a respectful setting where an apology wouldn't seem intrusive or inappropriate. Marcus made a mental note of the event details and spent the rest of the evening preparing what he wanted to say. He practiced his apology multiple times, trying to strike the right tone, sincere without being overly dramatic, accountable without making excuses, and respectful of her time and position. The opportunity he needed was finally within reach, but Marcus knew that he would have only one chance to get it right. The leadership forum was scheduled for Thursday evening in the main auditorium of the Student Union building. Marcus spent the 3 intervening days practicing his apology and researching the proper way to approach a military officer in a civilian setting. He wanted to ensure that his attempt to make amends would be respectful and appropriate. On the day of the forum, Marcus arranged to have another student worker cover the final hour of his shift so he could attend the event. He showered and changed into his best clothes, a button-down shirt and khakis that he usually reserved for job interviews or important presentations. Looking in the mirror, he tried to project an image of someone who took this opportunity seriously. The auditorium was filling up when Marcus arrived, with students, faculty, and members of the local community taking their seats. The event was part of a speaker series designed to expose students to diverse perspectives on leadership and public service. Along with General Chen, the panel included a federal judge, a nonprofit director, and a city council member. Marcus chose a seat in the middle section, close enough to see the speakers clearly, but not so close that he would feel conspicuous. As the lights dimmed and the moderator took the podium to introduce the panelists, Marcus felt his nervousness increasing. This was his chance to take responsibility for his actions, but it would require courage to approach someone of General Chen's stature. The panel discussion covered a wide range of topics related to leadership and service. Each panelist shared insights from their respective fields, discussing challenges they had faced and lessons they had learned throughout their careers. When it was General Chen's turn to speak about military leadership, she once again demonstrated the thoughtful, measured approach that Marcus now recognized as her characteristic style. Leadership in the military isn't about commanding blind obedience, she explained to the audience. It's about earning trust through consistent actions, making difficult decisions with incomplete information, and taking responsibility for both successes and failures. But perhaps most importantly, it's about treating every person under your command with dignity and respect, regardless of their rank or role. As she spoke, Marcus felt a fresh wave of shame about their cafeteria encounter. Here was someone who managed thousands of personnel and million-dollar budgets, yet she spoke about the importance of treating everyone with dignity, a principle he had failed to follow when dealing with what he perceived as an inconvenience during his minimum-wage job. The formal presentation portion of the evening concluded with a question-and-answer session. Students and community members asked thoughtful questions about ethical decision-making, work-life balance in demanding careers, and strategies for building effective teams. General Chen's responses were consistently thoughtful and practical, demonstrating both her experience and her ability to communicate complex ideas clearly. When the moderator announced that the forum was concluded, Marcus felt his heart rate spike. The moment he had been preparing for was finally at hand. As the audience began to disperse and people approached the stage to speak with the panelists individually, Marcus made his way toward the front of the auditorium. General Chen was engaged in conversation with several students who had questions about military career opportunities. Marcus waited nearby, listening to her patient explanations of different military specialties and education programs. Her willingness to spend time with each student, answering their questions thoroughly despite the late hour, further impressed him. When the last of the students had finished their questions, Marcus stepped forward. General Chen looked at him with polite attention, and he could see the moment of recognition flash across her face. Her expression remained neutral and professional, giving no indication of how she felt about their previous encounter. "General Chen," Marcus began, his voice slightly shaky despite his practice. "I'm Marcus Rodriguez. We met briefly in the university cafeteria earlier this week, and I wanted to speak with you if you have a moment." "Of course," she replied calmly. "How can I help you?" Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that this was his moment to demonstrate the growth and maturity he had been developing since their encounter. "I wanted to apologize for how I treated you in the cafeteria. I was rude and unprofessional, and there was no excuse for my behavior. I was frustrated about the accident, but I took that frustration out on you in a completely inappropriate way." General Chen studied his face as he spoke, her expression thoughtful but unreadable. She waited to see if he had more to say. "I want you to know that I've been thinking about that incident every day since it happened," Marcus continued. "Not just because I later learned about your position and accomplishments, but because I realized how poorly I represented myself and my workplace. I treated you with disrespect when you deserved courtesy and understanding." "I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me about this," General Chen said after a moment. Her tone was professional but not cold. "It takes character to acknowledge mistakes and seek to make amends." Marcus felt a small sense of relief that she was willing to engage with his apology, but he could tell that she was still evaluating his sincerity. He needed to be completely honest about what he had learned. "Your response that day really stuck with me," he admitted. "You stayed calm and professional even when I was being hostile. Then, when I saw you give that lecture in my economics class, I started to understand what real leadership looks like. It's not about demanding respect or making others accommodate you. It's about how you choose to respond when things don't go your way." A slight smile appeared at the corners of General Chen's mouth. "That's a valuable lesson that took me many years to learn fully. It's easy to remain composed when everything is going smoothly. The real test comes during moments of stress or conflict." Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "That's exactly what I've been trying to work on. I've been making an effort to treat every customer with patience and respect, especially when situations become stressful. I realize now that how I handle small challenges reflects who I am as a person." "That sounds like genuine growth," General Chen observed. "But tell me, Marcus, What made you decide to approach me tonight? This couldn't have been easy for you. The question caught Marcus off guard, forcing him to examine his own motivations more deeply. Honestly, at first I was just embarrassed because I found out who you were. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that wasn't the real issue. The real issue was that I had treated another human being poorly, regardless of their position or background. I needed to take responsibility for that. General Chen's expression softened slightly. That's an important distinction. True accountability isn't about who we wronged, but about acknowledging when our actions fall short of our values. Yes, exactly, Marcus said, feeling like she understood what he was trying to express. I've been reading about your work and career, and I'm amazed by what you've accomplished. But what really impressed me was learning about your leadership philosophy. The idea that strength comes from choosing compassion and professionalism even in difficult moments. Where did you read about that? General Chen asked with curiosity. There was an interview you did a few years ago about international cooperation in humanitarian missions. You talked about how real leadership means responding with dignity even when others don't reciprocate that respect. General Chen looked genuinely surprised that he had done such thorough research. You've certainly done your homework. I'm impressed that you took the time to understand the broader context. Marcus felt encouraged by her response. Your example that day taught me more about leadership than any textbook could. Even though I was being rude and defensive, you chose to respond with grace. That showed me what real strength looks like. Well, I appreciate your honesty and your willingness to learn from the experience, General Chen said. But I hope you understand that the most important audience for your growth is yourself. Changing how you treat others shouldn't depend on who they are or what they might think of you. I understand that now, Marcus replied. This whole experience has made me realize that every interaction is an opportunity to demonstrate your values, whether anyone important is watching or not. General Chen extended her hand to Marcus. I accept your apology, Marcus. More than that, I respect the effort you've made to learn and grow from a difficult moment. That kind of self-reflection and accountability will serve you well throughout your life. As they shook hands, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't fully realized he was carrying. The guilt and shame that had been gnawing at him for days finally began to recede, replaced by a sense of closure and genuine learning. Thank you for giving me the chance to apologize properly, Marcus said. And thank you for the example you set, both that day and in your presentation tonight. I hope I can live up to the leadership principles you've demonstrated. Just remember that leadership isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments, General Chen advised. It's about consistently choosing to do the right thing, especially in the small, everyday situations where our character is really tested. As Marcus walked back across campus that evening, he reflected on how much had changed since the cafeteria incident. He had approached the situation determined to make a proper apology, but he had received much more than forgiveness. He had gained insight into what authentic leadership looked like and how personal growth required both acknowledging mistakes and committing to better choices going forward. The conversation with General Chen had validated his efforts to improve his customer service and interpersonal skills over the past week. More importantly, it had reinforced his growing understanding that true strength came not from avoiding accountability when things went wrong, but from facing difficult conversations with honesty and maturity. Marcus thought about how different the original incident might have been if he had responded to the accident with the kind of composure General Chen had shown. Instead of escalating the situation with defensive anger, he could have simply apologized for bumping into her chair and helped clean up the spill without making her feel like an inconvenience. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could ensure that future challenges would find him better prepared to respond with the kind of leadership and character he was still learning to develop. The lesson from General Chen would stay with him far beyond his college years, shaping how he approached conflicts and setbacks throughout his life. Walking past the now quiet cafeteria where their encounter had begun, Marcus made a silent commitment to honor the grace General Chen had shown him by extending that same grace to others when they inevitably fell short of their best selves. Leadership, he now understood, was as much about how you helped others grow from their mistakes as it was about avoiding mistakes yourself. 2 months had passed since Marcus's conversation with General Chen at the Leadership Forum. The semester was drawing to a close, and the changes in his approach to work and relationships had become more than just a temporary response to embarrassment. They had become genuine habits that were reshaping how others saw him and how he saw himself. Linda had noticed the transformation immediately. Marcus's customer service scores had improved dramatically, and several regular customers had specifically mentioned his helpfulness and positive attitude in their feedback forms. More importantly, his coworkers had begun looking to him for guidance when dealing with difficult situations, recognizing that his calm, professional demeanor could diffuse tension and resolve problems effectively. "Marcus, I wanted to talk to you about something," Linda said as he finished his morning setup routine one Tuesday. "I've been watching your development over the past couple of months, and I'm really impressed with the changes you've made." Marcus looked up from the coffee station he was organizing, curious about where this conversation was heading. "I'm going to be interviewing candidates for an assistant supervisor position next month," Linda continued. "It would involve more responsibility, training new workers, handling customer complaints, and helping manage the daily operations. The pay increase would be significant, and it would look great on your resume for future opportunities." Marcus felt a surge of excitement mixed with nervousness. The promotion would mean more than just additional income. It would be recognition that his efforts to grow and improve had been noticed and valued. "I'd be very interested in that opportunity," he said. "What would the process involve?" "There will be formal interviews with a panel from Dining Services Administration," Linda explained. "But honestly, based on your recent performance and the feedback I've received about you, I think you'd be a strong candidate. The question is whether you're ready for the additional challenges that come with leadership responsibility." The word leadership triggered memories of his conversations with General Chen and the lessons he had learned about what authentic leadership actually meant. He thought about her emphasis on treating every person with dignity and using authority to serve rather than to dominate. "I think I'm ready," Marcus said with growing confidence. "I've learned a lot about myself and about leadership over the past few months. I'd like the chance to put those lessons into practice." Over the following weeks, Marcus threw himself into preparing for the interview process while continuing to excel in his current role. He studied the cafeteria's operations more systematically, paying attention to inefficiencies and thinking about potential improvements. He also began observing how Linda handled various management challenges, learning from her experience and leadership style. One afternoon, while Marcus was training a new worker named James on proper food safety procedures, a situation arose that tested his developing leadership skills. A student approached the counter during the lunch rush and began loudly complaining about the long wait times and limited menu options. "This is ridiculous," the student announced, his voice carrying across the dining area. "I've been standing in line for 20 minutes and half the stuff I want isn't even available. Don't you people understand that some of us have classes to get to?" Marcus watched James's reaction carefully. The new worker looked nervous and uncertain, clearly unsure how to handle an angry customer. Other staff members glanced over, waiting to see how the situation would be resolved. "I understand your frustration," Marcus said, stepping forward with a calm voice and professional demeanor. "The lunch rush can definitely be challenging. Let me see what I can do to help you get what you need quickly." Instead of becoming defensive or making excuses, Marcus focused on problem solving. He checked with the kitchen staff about when additional menu items would be ready and offered alternative options that would satisfy the students' dietary needs. He also called over another worker to open a second register, helping to reduce the wait time for other customers. "I appreciate you taking care of this," the student said, his anger diffusing as Marcus addressed his concerns practically. "I know it's not your fault that things get busy." After the student left with his food, James looked at Marcus with obvious admiration. "How did you stay so calm? I was getting angry just listening to him complain. A few months ago, I probably would have gotten defensive too," Marcus admitted. "But I've learned that how you respond to conflict says more about your character than the conflict itself. When someone is frustrated, they usually just want to feel heard and have their problem solved." This interaction, and several similar ones over the following weeks, reinforced Marcus's growing understanding of practical leadership. It wasn't about having authority over others, it was about using whatever influence you had to make situations better for everyone involved. The interview process for the assistant supervisor position involved meeting with Linda, the director of dining services, and a representative from human resources. Marcus prepared thoroughly, researching best practices in food service management and thinking carefully about how he would handle various scenarios they might present. "Marcus, Your performance reviews have been excellent, and Linda speaks very highly of your recent development, the director began. But this position requires someone who can handle conflict resolution, staff training, and operational decision-making. If you take black pieces of the ideas of your self-coming historical work, I don't see it's effective. Are you disciplined by black pieces? He also shared examples of how you had helped train, contributed ideas for improving efficiency during busy periods. You can't get enough black pieces to do so because, what do you think is the most important quality for someone in a leadership position in food service? The human resources representative asked. Treating every person with respect and dignity, Marcus answered without hesitation. Whether it's a customer who's having a bad day, a coworker who's struggling to learn new procedures, or a staff member who's dealing with personal challenges. How you treat people when they're at their worst says everything about who you are as a leader. The panel exchanged glances, clearly impressed with his response. Linda smiled, recognizing the growth she had witnessed in Marcus over the past several months. Where did that philosophy come from? The director asked with curiosity. Marcus thought about how to answer truthfully without going into unnecessary detail about his encounter with General Chen. I had the opportunity to learn from someone who demonstrated real leadership during a difficult moment in my life. They showed me that true strength comes from choosing compassion and professionalism, even when others don't reciprocate that respect. A week later, Linda called Marcus into her office with a big smile on her face. Congratulations, Assistant Supervisor Rodriguez. The position is yours starting next semester. Marcus felt a surge of pride and gratitude that went beyond the excitement of a promotion. This opportunity represented validation that his efforts to grow and change had been successful. More than that, it gave him a platform to implement the leadership principles he had learned and to help others develop those same skills. As news of his promotion spread through the cafeteria staff, Marcus received congratulations from coworkers who had witnessed his transformation over the past few months. Several of the newer workers expressed excitement about working under his supervision, knowing that he would be patient and supportive as they learned their roles. That evening, Marcus decided to write a letter to General Chen, updating her on how the lessons from their encounters had continued to shape his development. He wasn't sure if she would remember him or if she would have time to read his letter, but he felt compelled to share how profoundly their interactions had affected his life. In his letter, Marcus described the promotion and explained how the leadership principles she had demonstrated had guided his approach to management and customer service. He wrote about specific situations where her example had helped him choose constructive responses over defensive reactions. Most importantly, he thanked her for showing him that accountability and growth were possible even after making significant mistakes. A few weeks later, Marcus was surprised to receive a response letter from General Chen. Her note was brief but warm, congratulating him on his promotion and expressing pride in his continued development. She enclosed a small book about servant leadership, with a note inside the cover that read, "True leaders are made through service to others. Keep growing, keep learning, and keep treating people with dignity." Marcus treasured that book and the validation it represented. General Chen's continued encouragement meant more to him than she probably realized, serving as a reminder that the most influential leaders are often those who take time to invest in others' growth and development. As Marcus began his new role as assistant supervisor, he made a commitment to create the kind of work environment he wished he had experienced when he first started at the cafeteria. He instituted regular training sessions focused not just on procedures and policies, but on customer service philosophy and conflict resolution skills. He established a mentorship program pairing experienced workers with new hires, ensuring that everyone had support as they learned their roles. Most importantly, Marcus made sure that every staff member understood that their work mattered and that they were valued members of the team. He remembered how isolated and stressed he had felt during his early weeks on the job, and he was determined that new workers would have a different experience. The transformation that had begun with a moment of poor judgment in a crowded cafeteria had evolved into a comprehensive change in how Marcus approached relationships, responsibility, and leadership. The lessons he had learned from General Chen's example continued to guide his decisions and shape his character long after their brief encounters had ended. Years later, when Marcus had graduated and moved into a management role in the corporate world, he would still think about that pivotal moment when he learned that true leadership wasn't about asserting dominance or avoiding accountability. Instead, it was about choosing to respond with grace under pressure, treating every person with dignity regardless of their status, and using whatever authority you possess to serve others rather than to serve yourself. The young man who had once pushed blame onto others when situations became stressful had become someone who took responsibility for creating positive outcomes, even in challenging circumstances. The encounter with General Chen had been brief, but its impact on Marcus's character and career would last a lifetime, rippling out through every person he would lead and every team he would manage throughout his professional journey. General Chen's example had shown him that the most powerful leaders are often those who choose quiet strength over loud authority, and that the greatest victories come not from proving you're right, but from helping others become their best selves. These were lessons that Marcus would carry forward, sharing them with others just as they had been shared with him during that transformative period of his young adult life.